Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, James shares his path from the nonprofit world and the Peace Corp to working as an associate in private equity after getting his MBA from Duke. We learn what it was like living and working in Costa Rica for the Grameen bank, as well as how he defied all odds to land a job in private equity, even after he didn't get a return offer from Moelis after his summer associate role there. Enjoy. All right, James, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Yeah, man. Happy to be here.
It'd be great if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Yeah, man. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. Went to school up in Virginia at Washington and Lee. Majored in accounting and business administration. Did a theater minor. And while I was there, I also wrestled. I was on the varsity wrestling team for a couple of years. But while I was there, I had that distinct urge to get what I was learning out of the classroom. So started a little company over in Nairobi. We were making hoodies with men and women living in the slums out there and sending them over to the U.S. That led me to a fellowship from what's called the Princeton Alumni Corps. Took me up to D.C. I worked for a nonprofit doing federal contracting work where we staffed people with disabilities on the contracts. But I was still working on the hoodie gig over in Africa, and wanted to be closer to it and be on the ground. And so the Peace Corp seemed like a really great way to get there. So applied, got accepted, went to Costa Rica for a couple of years, worked for a microfinance bank down there called Grameen, and then taught entrepreneurship classes in high school and a lot of other weird stuff. On the way back to the U.S., decided I wanted to scale the impact I was having on the world, and business school seemed like a way to do it. So went to Fuqua at Duke, which was close to home. They have an awesome impact investing program. Eventually wanted to get to money management and to the buy side. And so doing an investment banking internship seemed like the right way to get there. Interned at Moelis, had an awesome experience, loved the city. And then second year of business school, set to re-recruiting for private equity down in the Southeast, and ended up at Target Hunter, which is a restaurant-focused private equity firm. Been here for about a year and a half now.
Cool, awesome. Thanks for the rundown. So let's start all the way back at undergrad.
Yeah.
Or even before. You were an accounting major? Was finance ever, or private equity? Did you even know what it was back then? Was it on the radar?
Yeah, so Washington and Lee has kind of a weird set of majors, and so there is no finance major. You basically have to do this combined major of business and accounting. Mm-hmm. We call it with special attainments in commerce or something funky like that, and that's the finance track. And so lots of buddies were going into banking. I don't know. I honestly didn't have an interest in it back then. I don't know. It wasn't even on the radar for me.
And so what were you doing in your years, your summers off? Were there internships? What was kind of driving you towards this nonprofit stuff?
Yeah, sure. So what actually really drove me most towards the nonprofit work was I did a study abroad in Spain, and I was basically as close to Africa as I was going to get. And I had cooked up this idea. I had very much had an entrepreneurial spirit. I grew up in a family business. My family actually owns restaurants. And so I was close, and I had this idea, and I was like, I don't ever want to work for anyone. I'm going to go start my own deal and save the world,
Yeah, very a good dreamer. So tell me a little bit about the restaurant business of your family you grew up in, and did you do a lot of work in that growing up?
Yeah, man. So it's
what kind of restaurants and all that?
Family owned. It's 15 of them. It's called Lizard's Thicket, and they're all in the middle part of South Carolina. It's country cooking. breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 7 days a week. Uh, it's like a really good hearty meal for a pretty good price. But it's, man, growing up in that business teaches you so much because it's hard work. No one gives you anything. And so to have grown up with my dad, my uncles running that and working hard and getting to get in there. And they never let me like be a server or like a waiter. I was always washing dishes and busting tables, but it teaches you the value of a dollar.
Sure does. Sure does. Cool. That's good. So you're kind of growing up in that entrepreneurial household. So it was in the DNA, sounds like a little bit. So as you're going to college, were your parents like pushing you to finance, or are you just thinking, oh, this is a good thing to have to potentially get a steady job?
Yeah.
Like,
So
I
when
guess
it came,
what was like the thought process behind, okay, why
yeah,
accounting? Maybe you had a bent towards theater. Why didn't you just become a full-on theater major?
yeah. So when it came to college, my parents have always been super supportive. They would have let me do anything I wanted to.
That's
Um, but when I was like getting to the age where you're supposed to be applying to college, they didn't go to college, so they were kind of like,
mm,
"So are you gonna go to college?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, everyone else is doing it, you know." And when I got there, accounting and finance seemed like the thing that it's just it can't come naturally to you. You have to learn it. Like
mm,
someone has to teach that to you. And so I felt like if I don't have someone sit me down and get this into my head, like I'm never going to learn it. It's not just going to be something that I pick up along the way.
got
So
it.
that was the idea.
Okay, so were you thinking like maybe work for a big four or something like that, or there was just I'm just gonna get these skills and we'll see where it takes
Get the skills and
me?
see where
Okay,
it takes me. I
got
was
it.
honestly, I just thought I was going to be an entrepreneur.
So you're going towards graduation, and what was the thought process? What was the next step? Even if you weren't thinking that far ahead, even if it was like 3 months ahead or a month ahead, what were you thinking as you approached graduation?
Yeah, so it was like I had started the little company, and as I'm getting close to graduation, I'm thinking like, man, this is not going to make enough money to support my life. I need to get a job.
And this is the company you're talking about is the one in Africa, the hoodies. And this
Right.
is so explain a little bit more to listeners what you were actually doing and how you even got this going.
Yeah. Yeah. So
'Cause I
it's
think
called
that's
Udo.
it's an interesting story.
Yeah, man. So it's called Udo. Someone had brought me a gift from Africa, and it was this like beautifully made piece of clothing out of very traditional African fabric. And so I'm over in Spain. I book a flight to Kenya. I pop down there, literally don't know a soul. I had met a man in the US who was like on the board for Feed the Children, big nonprofit. And so I had emailed him and asked for a tour of their facilities in Kenya because I knew they had a big facility there. So I get there, I get on the ground. I'm literally hit the streets, walking around, talking to people, trying to find a tailor, like someone who can sew together some clothing for me. And
You were just
come to,
speaking English and just
yeah,
saying, "Hey, give me." You guys know where a tailor is? Like you're like, what are you signing or like?
they most which honestly like facts about Africans, like most people in speak multiple languages, and
Yeah,
so English got me by.
yeah.
And most of the villages that are in the slums around Nairobi, each village has their own tailor. So someone got me in touch with a tailor. I went to the tailor's house, a guy named George, and George started putting together some samples for me. And so on the last day that I'm there, I take one of the samples to Feed the Children. I get this tour of their facilities, and like the country director finally, like at the end of it, sits me down in her office. She's like, "So, like, what do you want? Like, why are you here?" I was like, "Well, I've got this idea. I think that if the mothers of the children that you're feeding, they're all looking for income generating activities, right?" And I was like, "Well, I think I've got an income generating activity. And so if they can make these hoodies, we'll train them, we'll teach them how to sew, we'll build the skills up. And then if they can make them, I'll buy them all." And they were like, "All right, sounds great." So we set to work. We started making hoodies, and they would send them over to the US. And I was living in DC at the time. And I
So were
was
you
like,
selling these, or like how are you selling these in the U.S.?
yeah, I got connected. I actually got connected with an awesome group of young guys that were at Howard, and they like loved it. They felt like it was like a cultural connection for them, and they were all excited about it. And so I was like slanging hoodies on the side with these guys, and they were awesome, and they were we were doing photo shoots, and it was cool, man. It was like
How
a
many
whole nother
how many
side
do
of
you think
life.
you sold after like in the full time you were running? A couple
Gosh,
hundred?
it was
Something?
probably like if I sold, yeah, like definitely in the hundreds, not in the thousands.
Okay.
Yeah,
Still, it's a lot of hoodies.
yeah, it was good, man. It was an awesome learning experience.
Cool. So you're doing that. It's not paying the bills because I assume you're making what, like $30 a hoodie or something profit or something like that.
Something like that.
um, so what's the plan? Did you move back home after graduation? What were you doing, or were you just floating?
No, yeah. So I got there's an incredible center at Washington Lee. It's called their Poverty Center, and so there's a fellowship through there that's connected to the Princeton Alumni Corps. And so like, at the time it was like Princeton, U
What's the
Chicago.
Princeton Alumni Corps? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so there's a network of alumni that basically have connections in some of the major cities, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like New York, Chicago, and DC, maybe like Houston as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they have connections with these nonprofits that like need young people to come in with good energy and be helpful,
Cool.
and otherwise like wouldn't be able to recruit them, right? And so once you get accepted into the fellowship, you're in this like pool of kids from a handful of schools, and then those kids go and interview at all the different partner companies.
Got it.
And so I got one of them, luckily. This was like the last month of school, and I was like, all right, awesome. I've got a job. I got something to do, making like 30 grand a year.
Yeah, hey, all good.
uh,
Pays the bills.
yeah. Oh man, it was perfect. It's just
And
what I
so,
needed.
tell me what you did with that company. What was the company specifically, and how did you help?
Yeah, it was called Linden Resources, and
Mm-hmm.
they're gone now. They've since merged with a larger nonprofit, but they had like 10 federal contracts. They were getting like $1 million in revenue a year. Did not rely on donations, so all of their income was coming from federal contracting, and then they would staff those contracts with people with disabilities. And so they were able to use a part of the law that allows a nonprofit to pay people for their productivity rather than by the hour. So someone who's, for example, severely physically handicapped and can only stuff one envelope an hour,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you can pay them an appropriate wage in a fulfillment center so that they have a meaningful career and something to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was doing
So,
business
meaning
development.
you're basically allowed to pay them below minimum wage because their
Mm-hmm.
productivity is so much lower, but it at least
Yep.
gives them some sense of purpose and doing something.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
instead of being in a full-time care facility, they have a
Right.
job to go to.
Cool.
Yeah, it was very cool.
So you did that for, it looks like a couple of years, if I'm looking at this right.
Couple years, and then
And yeah, and then the Costa Rica came calling.
Costa Rica
Yeah. So
came
tell me how
calling.
you even thought of Costa Rica and specifically Peace Corps. Like, so you were already kind of into this nonprofit bent. So
Yeah,
it's not too surprising that you went Peace Corps, but tell me about why Costa Rica, how that whole process worked out in terms of what you were thinking of in terms of the impact you wanted to have, or is it just more like, hey, let's go on an adventure?
man, it's a little bit of both. I'd had a taste of it in Africa, like being there on the ground for some short periods of time, and I was like, I want to go be there full time. And any Peace Corps volunteer will tell you that it often starts out as a very selfless endeavor. You think like, hey, I'm going to go serve and it's going to be awesome, and I'm going to help do my little part. And the Peace Corps, man, it becomes a very not selfish but self-indulgent endeavor, because you realize at the end of it that you're walking away with so much more than you're leaving behind. You do have an impact on the people in your community and the people around you while you're there, but the way that it changes you and your kind of world view is really it's just something really powerful.
Talk to me about that. How did it change your worldview?
Yeah, man. Well, there's a lot of things you take for granted in life. For me, for example, financial security was something that I don't know, I just kind of assumed I had. And then you go down there and you realize that it's just not, you realize how important it is, and that it's something you have to work for, and it's something you never want to lose. You also realize, and this is some of it specific to my Costa Rica experience, but the family unit is just so important there. and keeping the people who love you close and being around them is just such a powerful thing. And it's what makes us stronger and makes us who we are. And so a lot of a lot of that influenced what I did afterwards. But kind of while I was there, the main focus of my work was with Grameen Bank.
But tell me how you even decided Costa Rica, like what,
Oh yeah,
and why Peace Corps, like why suddenly, you've already done a lot of stuff. You've already done a lot of nonprofit work. Why
yeah,
double down and do it again? I mean, it sounds like
yeah,
you were enjoying it. You wanted to get back onto the ground
yeah, yeah. So
out of the US.
yeah, I think, and I was a little fed up with like DC culture. For anyone who's ever lived there, it's like it's a very social culture. It's really fun,
Mm-hmm.
great place to be after college. But there's a lot of like, you know, climbing the ladder, and I don't know. I wanted out. I wanted
Rat
to
race, a lot of rat race stuff.
a lot of rat race, right? And so I needed to go like reset, and then you don't actually get to pick where you go. This was the first. I was the first like group, one of the first groups of people who actually got to even put a preference. And my like preferences were like Africa, Eastern Europe, and Asia. And
And you ended up
but
in
I
Costa
think
Rica.
they gave me Costa Rica, which
Did you
is
speak
wild.
Spanish? Did you speak Spanish before going?
Like a very, very little bit.
Solo un
Uh,
poquito. Okay.
I
And
might have embellished a little bit on my application about how much I spoke, but
that's
it
why they
got me
sent you there.
there. Yeah,
Okay, so you ended up in Costa Rica, a beautiful country. And so they fly you in and you're going where? Like, how much guidance
yeah.
do they give you? I think people who are interested in this, like, do they assign you to a specific home, a specific location to live? And what's it like?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like from what you told me earlier in our call yesterday that it's like you arrived there and you saw this sign and it's like you just did what you had to do.
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit more before that. So what happens is they fly you all into the capital. It's like 20 of us. We met for the first time in Houston. They fly us all down together. We're in San Jose, the capital. They put and then it's 3 months of training. And so what they do is they put like little clusters of you in different towns. So like four of us lived in a little town called San Luis de Heredia,
Mm-hmm.
and we would 3 days a week we would have literally 10-hour days of nothing but spoken Spanish classes. Like it wasn't about writing, it wasn't about doing academic papers. It was like you got to talk, you got to be in the streets and having these cultural experiences and being very uncomfortable. So, and then the other 2 days a week were long, long days of essentially what was classroom time where you're learning safety and you're learning different skills and learning about different projects people have done and all the different resources you have. And so all that time, that 3 months, everyone's in the capital together. You have no idea where you'll be when it's over. And then when there's
Tell me
like,
about those intense kind of speech days where you're forced to go out and talk with people for 10 hours at a time. Were you really talking to people for that long? And this is my first question. The second question is, did people naturally gravitate back to your kind of co Peace Corps people to speak some English so you wouldn't like your
oh my
brain
God,
wouldn't?
yeah, your Peace Corps friends become like your security blanket, right?
Yeah.
Even later on when you're out in service, you're like calling them, and because you can't call home, man. People at
Mm.
home don't understand the different things you're going through down there. So you're really leaning on your people. But the 10-hour day, the 10, 12 like long days of speaking Spanish, you would start off in a classroom usually. And so with my neighborhood of people, they separated us out by like who was really good at Spanish, who was okay, and who didn't really know much. And so I was in like the middle class, and we had a professor who was teaching us a lot throughout the day, forcing us to have conversations, giving us homework, etc. And then like at some point he'd be like, all right, everyone leave and like go find people on the streets and go have these conversations with them, like ask them these questions. So those were some of the days. Other days they would actually take you to like cultural events. They like Latin culture, there's like tons of festivals always, a lot of religious festivals. And so we'd go out and just have to, I mean, you fumble through it, man. Like you think
Do you feel like your
sometimes
Spanish got a lot better in that little time frame?
oh
Probably
yeah,
amazing, right?
it had to. They wouldn't let you go to your like final site if you didn't have it. So it got good enough to get me there. And then obviously over the next year and a half or so,
It got
really,
really
really
good.
good.
That's awesome. So okay, so you're kind of the destination is decided, and so now you're alone.
Yes, that's right. And
Okay.
like they try to cluster you regionally so that like there were a few other volunteers within like an hour of me.
Okay.
And but yeah, they set you up with a family. You have a host family who you have to live with your host family for the first like 3 or 6 months. And then you're allowed to move out and get your own place basically.
Okay. And how
Um,
are they paying you? Is the Peace Corps paying
mhm.
you? And how much are
I
they
think
paying you?
I want to say it equated to like $300 a month,
Okay.
um, which obviously doesn't sound like a lot.
Down there
It's
you can
not.
make it
Yeah,
stretch.
it's still not a lot down there,
No.
honestly. The kind of the point is that like, you're not vacationing or you don't have any uh
Disposable
like
income.
no for yeah right you're kind of living with the people and like the people.
Yep.
um
And you're just paying for food and
yeah
going back to your house.
you're paying rent and you're paying food, so you pay rent to your host family.
How much how
I
much was that? $100?
I really don't remember.
Yeah, I'm just
It's
curious.
probably like $100, like a third of your pay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That sounds right. But I started out with this one family, and I actually had a cool setup because they had like a little shack behind the house
Mm-hmm.
that was my bedroom, or
Nice.
it was like my little space. And so there was like busted out windows with bars on them, and it was like literally just like wood paneling, so like I could see outside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like there was just there I had a pipe coming out of the ceiling in the back. They just shot out freezing cold water, and that was my bathroom. like,
Oh gosh.
but I remember specifically,
So no real shower there.
no real shower there. And it's funny, like it was 100 degrees outside, and I just never got used to the cold showers.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, I like still didn't like it all the way through. I remember like I had a bat in my house at one point, and I like, went to war with this bat. I was like launching a broom across the room to like try and scare the bat out.
Oh my
But
gosh.
yeah,
So you're kind of down there. Your Spanish is getting better. And what are you doing day to day? So you tell me a little bit about Grameen and then what you did with them.
yeah. Well, so first of all, the Peace Corps does hook you up with like a partner,
Got it.
right? And so there was a teacher at the local high school who was supposed to be like my partner, and I was going to spend time in the school, and I did, and that blossomed into an awesome entrepreneurship program. I had two teams of kids that came up with business ideas. We went into the capital to like a national competition.
Cool.
One of them ended up getting the scholarship. So that was an awesome piece of this. But then the part that I kind of did on my own was I just read Muhammad Yunus's book, and I was sitting there. I was like, it must have been the first week, and I was walking down the street, and literally, like, the sign for Grameen Bank was in front of me, and I was like, no way, man! Like, this is too cool. So I walked in, I introduced myself in poor broken Spanish, and was like, I'm here to help. Like, I'll do anything, and I'll work for free. And they were like, oh, well, great, come with us. And so they had their little office. There's a couple of guys, and they lent money to women in small towns outside of kind of the bigger town where I
Yeah,
was
this
living.
microfinance. You want to explain real quick what that is to people who don't know?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's literally just lending very small sums of money to entrepreneurs that are trying to get their businesses off the ground.
Like $50, $100, $1,000.
Like literally hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. Okay.
And they structured them in a way where it's like uh, they're higher interest rates than you would expect, actually. But
They're grouped, right? They try to pair like 5 women together. Is that right? Or group them so that there's kind of social pressure
that's exactly right.
to
That's
pay it
exactly
back.
right.
Yeah.
So it's like 5 women will sign up for loans together, and then they are all responsible for each other's loans. And there's a bunch of interesting rules, like they can't be family members. They all have to live in the same community. And so, yeah, that's kind of like that's how they secure their loans. But then they also tried to really be helpful and like provide consulting services And that was like where I came in. It was like, great, we'll bring you, you'll help people. And so we would do little money management classes and like basic accounting workshops. Sometimes I got to like get really involved with some businesses, like, and you'd say, like, hey, I know that you have 3 different businesses going on, but once you separate them out, you realize like one of them's losing money. And so like, it was a really tough concept to be like, if you work less hard, you'll make more money. Right. It's like, you just got to stop doing that piece
How
of it.
doing this one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because they're not looking at the numbers. They're necessarily not all of them.
Right. Exactly. They never put them on paper and like,
Yeah.
making like little financial statements and stuff. Is cool, man.
That's awesome. So you're there in the program, is it typically a year, 2-year program, or how does it work?
2 years. So it's typically 27 months. I actually I got what's called medically separated. I had to have like a procedure done on my back, and you can only like leave for a certain amount of time before they're like, you can't come back. And
Okay.
I had to stay away longer. And so didn't get to quite finish out, which is,
We did almost
was
2
a
years,
bummer.
a year and a half or so. So that's a pretty good run.
Yeah, man.
So you come back, and then what's your thought process? You're thinking, I'm going to go do this again, or you're thinking, okay, that's enough with the bad in my little shanty shack in the cold showers. What was your thought process of what to do next, and why did it lead you to an MBA?
Yeah, man. So, well, like while you're down there, part of what you realize is that like just by being, you're having an impact on the world around you and on the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I thought about coming back to the US, I was like, well, look, this has been really awesome. I have had a small effect on a very small subset of people in this world. I would like to have a bigger impact, right? I'd like to find some scale to that impact I'm having. And so I looked at programs all around the country. I thought MBAs, of all the master's degrees, right? You also like, I needed a catalyst. It's hard to go Peace Corp to like just go get a job. And so school seemed like a good catalyst. An MBA seemed like the best program for me and what I wanted to be doing. And so looked all around the country, wanted to be close to home. Duke was right there, about as close as I could get. And Kathy Clark runs the best impact investing program in the country down there. And so I was only going to apply to Duke, actually. Some people convinced me to apply to a couple other places, but
Are there any other good impact investing MBA program? It'd be good to list those out if you know, given that you've done the research.
Yeah, ones that I was particularly interested in were Northwestern and Stanford. Yale has a really good one too. But honestly, any big school that has the resources, I think you can find your path. It's just it's evolving all the time. But Duke was just like the clear. Like I could say Harvard has a good one too. Like of course Harvard has a decent impact investing program, but Duke really felt like they were like the pioneers.
Got it.
To me.
Okay, so you're kind of studying for the GMAT at this point, or what's the?
Oh yeah, I did the GMAT in Costa Rica.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Oh,
you were already thinking about this. Okay.
Yeah, so this was like kind of part of the, I was like, I'll apply. Technically, like what would have happened is right when I was ending my 27 months would have been the start of business school.
And so tell me specifically. So you said you hurt your back. Did you hurt your back down there, or you just needed some surgery?
It was like an old injury that got really bad down there.
Got it. Okay. No, slip disc or something. Yeah, not good. Okay, so you basically kind of had a path of, okay, MBA, I want to do some sort of impact investing. Were you thinking investment banking, private equity? What were you thinking?
Honestly, the thought was, okay, like the biggest issue that entrepreneurs face is access to capital. Mm-hmm. So I need to get to a place in my life where people with a lot of money will trust me to manage their money. Like that was pretty much like the very simple thought behind it. Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, how do I get there? Do I go be a consultant? Do I go be a banker? And I got convinced that, eventually private equity was the way to go. Work for someone else who manages someone else's money. How do I get there? The best next step felt like go do an investment banking internship.
Okay. So tell me about that. So you get to, you do okay on the GMAT. I assume you have a really good story, I'm sure, from your experiences. Your essays probably wrote themselves. And then from there, you get into Duke. I assume you were super excited.
Yeah, man, I was thrilled. That
Yeah.
was like the dream.
Yeah, and so then you're enrolling, and then tell me what it was like because you don't really have any of this technical. I mean, you have some accounting background, but like it's a whole other beast interviewing for associate positions at, like a
Yeah.
Moelis. So tell me what that was like, kind of coming in, and it hits fast. Like you get onto
Hmm.
campus, and then recruiting happens within like a month, right? So
Yep.
tell me a little bit about that whole process, what it was like coming from your specific background, and how you survived.
Yeah, no. So this was another piece of Duke's culture that was really appealing to me. It's like known for being very collegial. People are very supportive. And I knew I was going to need it. Right. And so I ended up making incredible friends and just having a really tight knit group of people who are all in this investment banking recruiting process with me. And look, man, like there's no secret to it. Like you just got to study, you just got to learn it. Right. And
Mhm.
so we had late nights. We skipped winter break. We like spent spent time in our team rooms or whatever, studying, doing casing each other, and like that's. I mean, man, there's just no secret sauce. Like, yeah, like the story helps, and making sure you craft it in such a way that is convincing and says like, hey, look, I really want to do this, and I'm going to be here for the long term. Makes helps, and you have to get good at that as part of the practice.
And how many
But
how many rounds did you, or how many banks did you get like first round interviews with, and then from there, how did you progress? Was it like you had several offers for summer internships, or you had like just one? Tell me how that progressed.
yeah, I think I had like 7 or 8
First rounds,
interviews.
pretty good.
Yeah, like yeah, it was good. I remember thinking I had done well, right? Like I got most of the US bulge bracket banks, and then I Moelis was the only like boutique, I think. But it was like Goldman, Morgan Stanley, BAML, Barclays.
And then how did you do in those first rounds? And how many did you like? I like talking numbers, like in specifics,
Yeah,
like in
yeah,
terms of conversions, to give people an idea of like, oh man,
sure.
this is really hard, or oh wow, he did really
Yeah,
well, or oh
yeah,
man, he barely got in by the skin of his teeth. For me,
right.
that's what it was. It was me when I was applying as an analyst at undergrad. Like I barely got in.
Yeah.
It was 01, 02, right after 9/11.
Oh
It was
yeah.
it was crazy. So it was like people were barely hiring, and I got in like the last interview, last second. So I like giving people a little perspective of like I had to interview like 30 times to get that
Yeah.
one offer.
Yeah, well, that like one nice thing about the MBA programs is they make it really easy for you. Like
Yeah.
Duke, they all came to campus and
Yeah,
did
on
our first
campus.
round interviews on campus. So it was like a 2 day period where I had like, whatever, 8 interviews,
You
like
probably get
packed
really good at
days.
telling your story too.
Oh man. Oh, you get so good at it. You can tell in your sleep. But I got 2 offers after the first rounds from BAML and Barclays.
Oh, it's just first round and offer for internship. That's it.
They were kind of like I did multiple first round interviews like in those days. Like I hit
Got it.
like 2 or like it's hard, yeah, but like it's kind of like all it felt like all one round to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then I had super days at Moelis and Goldman, and so it was like I remember it was
Wait, so you
it
got
was like
you got internships offers directly from on campus
mhm,
interviews
yep,
at BAML and Moelis, or BAML and
Barclays.
Barclays? Oh, okay. So those kind of went first, but then you had super days at Goldman and Moelis on site.
Yeah, like where I had to go up to, and like everyone was just different in how they did it.
Okay. So tell me about those super days a little bit.
Yeah, man. It was like I guess what it was the year was this 2018. There was the really really bad winter storm. They had like shut down the East Coast, and I remember talking to the HR lady at Goldman. I was like, hey, like are we still doing this? Like, there's no way to get there. And she's like, oh yeah, like it'd be great if you could make it. I was like, all right, here we go. So I took a plane to DC and got on a train through the night, like just literally traveled through the night to get up there on a Friday morning, and like literally pulled into the city at like 9 a.m. or like it was probably like 8:50 for my 9 a.m. super day. And then I think it was
Like not having
four,
slept, not having slept.
oh, like not good sleep anyways. And it was like 4 rounds of 2 people at a time for I don't know if it was like 30 minutes each. Um, but so yeah, and like I thought that one went so well. I was like, man, I just crushed that. This is great. And then I went to Moelis, and I theirs was a little different. It was 3 different hour-long interviews with 2 senior people, and then one junior person did like a technical case interview.
Mm-hmm.
And the case interview went so poorly. And I was like, that guy didn't like me. Like, this is bad. Like, there is no chance that I got this offer. Lo and behold, I got the Moelis offer, and I did not get the Goldman offer.
Goes to show you, don't give up. And even if you think you're bombing, don't give up.
That's right, man. Just keep rolling with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, part of that too is like pressure testing, right? Like, can you keep it rolling if someone's, not happy with you? But so then I had the Moelis, Barclays, and BAML offers, and honestly, the Moelis opportunity was so unique relative to everything else I had been interviewing for, and it felt like it was the only way that I was really going to get M&A experience. You get into the bulge brackets, you're a Peace Corp guy, they put you in a coverage group. I was like, there's no way that I'm going to get like real technical M&A experience.
You feel like because you didn't have that pre-MBA, it was like just going to, by default, you're going to get slotted into like an ECM group or DCM group or whatever.
That was my fear. Plus, I was like, in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't know if I want to do investment banking forever. I want to get over to the buy side. I need to go like prove that I can hang in what is widely considered one of the toughest cultures, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Peace Corps to this. I mean, I was about to say, wow. Okay. So so tell me a little bit about what that summer was like. And I assume it was long hours, especially for you. Tell me how you handled that and kind of what you moved up to New York this summer. But tell me where you lived. What was the lifestyle like? Assume you're almost sleeping at the office at the beginning, but like tell me what was going on in terms of how you handled all that.
Yeah, I got really lucky with my roommate. I lived in West Village on 11th and 7th with a guy who was at Columbia and also interning at Moelis.
Oh, awesome.
Like totally random, hit a guy up on one of those lists where people post rooms for rent, and ended up that my roommate was just a great guy. We were like married for the summer. We like rode to work together, came home, you know what I mean?
Hilarious.
But the people I met, like yes, it was long hours. Like, yes, it is everything that they tell you it will be. But it was also so much fun to be in it with those other people in my internship class. Like, they are just great guys and girls. And we had a lot of fun together because, you sneak in a little bit of fun here and there. And then they schedule in a little bit of fun for you. You really feel like you're in it, man. You're like in the city, like doing it, being a banker. Like, this is awesome. This is real,
Do you feel like you could add any value, or like maybe near the end of your internship, you were like adding some value?
I do. So I do believe that most of the value that an MBA, so like coming up in that world of finance, right? Like, it's this very hierarchical, very like execution oriented. And as an MBA, I think I saw at least a lot of my like cohort mates like adding value from like a kind of like a project management standpoint and dealing with people, and like in terms of like thinking through presentations. Like, I think those are the places where the MBA adds more value, because
I know some of the analysts at Moelis are insanely talented and really good, so they can like run circles around you guys modeling wise. So like there's that weird dynamic that often happens. So
yes,
how did you deal with?
Are brilliant.
So how did you deal with that? Or you just kind of were like, hey, you teach me?
Yeah, like, seriously, like that is the only way to do it, is be like, hey, like, please, I'm ignorant. You are smarter than me. Please teach me.
Yeah.
Like, you have to humble yourself. If you come in there thinking you know what you're doing, like, you don't, and you're wrong.
Cool. So sounds like it went well. Near the end, did you get an offer? Did they know? Did you think you were going to get an offer? What was the whole dynamic there?
Yeah. So while I did love the experience, I had met who is now my wife before the summer, and she was in the South, and I was like, I got to get back to the South. Like, I can't do this. And I think I was probably a little too open about that. And so I did not end up getting the offer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh man, well, I kind of thought they'd at least like give me the offer so I can go shop it, you know?
Yeah.
But I didn't. And so I kind of like toyed with the idea of like, oh, damn, do I need to like re-recruit and get another offer in New York so I can go shop that? Like, I don't, eventually I just kind of said, you know what, like, I just got to focus on what I really want to do. And so I spent my entire second year and like hit it hard immediately when I got back to school, basically like on a road show around North and South Carolina and some Georgia, like talking to every single private equity, venture capital, mezz debt, like whatever, anything even close in the Southeast. And so
Anything
like,
close to principal investing.
exactly.
And so
Um,
but how did you even, there's not that many.
no.
So
Well,
how did you even like, is it like a group of 30 people? Like, what are you talking about here?
I mean, yeah, like I mean, maybe, right? Like, yeah, like 30 sounds right. But like you start networking and you basically just like ping pong around from person to person. Someone introduced you to the next group. And kept studying too, which was really important. Like I had to like keep the technical skills sharp and get sharper. But then yeah, like I networked my butt off, man. Like I started in South Carolina. There's a lot of like one man shops down in Charleston where people have moved from the Northeast and now
And they're
like,
like, I can't afford an MBA.
yeah, right. They're like
And you're like,
they're
no, no, no,
running
you don't
one.
understand. You're like, you don't understand. You can pay me a lot less than it took.
Yeah, you could. But then Charlotte's a good hub. There's a lot in Charlotte.
Yeah.
A couple NASDAQ shops up in Winston-Salem, and then was trying so hard to avoid Atlanta. I just personally didn't want to live in Atlanta.
Okay.
But started venturing that way.
Why just culturally?
I grew up a few hours from Atlanta. I spent a lot of time going there. I have lots of friends that live there, and I don't know, man. It's just the traffic. Like I don't know how to explain it. Like there's something about Atlanta. It's like hard to move around. It's a very
Sure.
disjointed city.
Cool. Okay. So
Um,
you're basically thinking you want to be in one of the Carolinas or
mhm.
okay. So you're networking and tell me how that, through the whole second year. I mean, are you nervous at this point? You're kind of coming up towards graduation. You have no offer.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
Mole.
You
Yeah.
definitely start to get a little worried, and you start like your scope gets broader and broader, and you have to keep reminding yourself like, no, like go do what you want to do. Like even if you have to wait, even if it's a few months after graduation, like hold on tight. You're gonna figure this out, because it was easy to like, oh well, like Deloitte has an M&A practice. That's like kind of close. And then
Hmm.
you start looking, like I interviewed with like some like a fund of funds in Minnesota. Like part of that is like you just got to keep interviewing, because you got to
Yeah.
keep it sharp, and like you learn
Tell me
some.
about the restrictions of where your now wife was looking then and what was she up to, and did that limit your geography a little bit?
Yeah, so she was back home in Columbia, South Carolina,
Mhm.
working for her family business, and they have like an insurance business. And so
Okay.
I knew she wanted to be close to family. So I come from like this huge Italian family. I have 30 first cousins.
Wow.
And then she comes from and then obviously family business, everyone kind of like stayed local. And then
Mhm.
she is Greek and comes from like the big fat Greek family,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
to a T.
Yeah.
And so we both like, then like, look, it goes all the way back to the Peace Corp deal. It's like, what'd you learn? Like, man, like I really want to be around my family.
Hmm.
It's just really important to me. Like
Hmm.
those are the people I love. And so we just kind of knew like, let's try and be within a few hours of there. She could work remotely. So
Very cool.
that was that was that restriction, I
Okay. So
suppose.
tell me the networking. What was your pitch? What was you're like, look, I went to the Peace Corp pre-MBA. I did all this nonprofit work. Then I had one internship in banking. I'm ready to be a private equity investor. Like, what was your pitch?
Well, the
I know
other
these are
thing,
smaller shops, but still, I mean,
yeah, the other thing that I did, which was really great, is there's a little like lower middle market investment bank in Chapel Hill called Jacobs Capital, and so I like went to
smart.
them and got a like year-long internship. So I was like,
This is during your second year.
yeah, so like basically my whole second year, I was working with these guys, and they were helping introduce me to people. They knew what I was trying to do, and they were just really really great. And again, like you keep learning, and then keep showing that commitment. to like, this is the world that I'm trying to be
And
in.
at that point, you're actually getting a few deals on your resume.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
You're getting to do a few
Your resume
small
looks a little
things.
more interesting.
Yeah. Right.
Cool.
And like, I guess you try not to change your story too much, but you'd have to tailor it a little bit depending on who you're talking to. Right.
Give me an
And
example of that.
well, because
Like,
when
so
you're
when you're talking
talking,
to Mez debt, you're like,
yeah,
I'm really fascinated in Mez and warrants. And no, but tell me a little bit of how you did that.
well, like when, for example, if I'm talking to a group in South Carolina or North Carolina, I'm like, look, I'm a Carolina guy. Like, I didn't want to be in New York anymore. Like, it just wasn't a cultural fit for me. Like, this is the kind of geographic place I want to be. But then when you take that one that was in New York or in Chicago, you had to be like, I loved New York. I just,
So you think you would have taken a Chicago or a New York offer if it was the right private equity thing and just made it work?
I think I would have. I think you have to be flexible,
Yeah.
right? Like, I knew that I was like the most long shot candidate ever too. So
Yep.
it was like, look, man, if I can land one, I'm gonna take it.
Yeah, you kind of had to. Okay, so tell me a little bit about how would you have worked that out with your now wife? Just a lot of traveling, for a year or two.
Yeah, probably so. I think that that's the only way we could have done it. I
Which
don't know
people
if
do
she would have
that.
moved.
People do that, but like I think, especially if it's like for a 1 or 2 year
Yeah,
thing, because it's that could launch. That would make it much easier theoretically to get a smaller middle market, lower middle market PE job in the
right,
Carolinas.
right.
So okay, so tell me how you made your break. So you're interning now at this Jacobs Capital, which is a kind of middle
Mhm.
market M&A shop in Raleigh.
Yep.
But tell me a little bit about the actual break of who introduced you, how you actually got in touch with your current job.
Yeah, so I had gotten put in touch with actually a mez debt shop that was up in Winston-Salem, and they heard my story and were like, "Have you heard of Hargett Hunter?" I was like, "No." And they're like, "Well, we'll introduce you, but we think you should know them." Like, okay, great. And so I go and I literally I just go and sit down and had a couple of beers with the three guys. There's two partners and one junior. And so I met all three of them. We like sat around, like nothing technical, like totally just like they're good old boys. They like went to UNC and NC State, and they
Yeah.
were like, I was like, man, this is cool. Like, all right, I kind of like this. And
Mm-hmm.
they were just about to do a first close of their first fund. And so
Good
I
timing.
kind of right. I was like, okay, I know that this is a thing. Like when you get the fundraise, then you have to hire people. I was like, okay, timing seems right. And then I literally I had drinks with them two more times. We had drinks three times, and then I got an offer. So like after all of the crazy technical interviews and like the hoops I had jumped through, and then I met these guys, and they were like, "We do restaurants. You grew up in a restaurant family. Like, this seems to make sense." And I was like, "Awesome."
But tell me about like those drinks. I mean, those drinks were really the interview, right?
They were. They
So
were
tell me a little bit
absolutely.
about how you conducted yourself
Yeah.
um, with a mind towards wanting not to be so tight, where they're like, "Oh, this guy's too tight," versus
Yeah.
being too loose.
No. Yeah.
And
I
because
I
I think
remember.
that's really tough line to walk when you're kind of in this interview setting, social setting.
Right. And I remember thinking, like, what do I wear?
How much do you
Like,
drink? What do you wear?
yeah, right. Like, I can't put a suit on. There's no way these guys wear suits, right? Like, I remember I put on like jeans and
And a button up.
a button down, and and they were like kind of wearing the same thing, and I was like, okay, good, that's good. That's like step number one. And
Yeah.
then yeah, like I remember like, yeah, there's no reason to drink a bunch. The last time I met with them and they actually gave me the offer, I probably drank too much,
being like being like 5 beers, 10 beers,
yeah, definitely not 10 beers.
not
But
10.
I had also realized like they were like, look, it's restaurant focused, man. Like these guys are like used to that setting, like to talk about food, like to eat and drink, and like,
Yeah.
and so it was very comfortable for me because it's how I grew up.
And so, what were you
Um,
guys talking about specifically? Like, talk about your time back, everything you did pre MBA. Were they curious?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I laid it all out for him, man. I was very honest with them. I was like, look, this is the kind of work I want to do. This is why I want to eventually, and I talked to him about my long-term career progression. I was like, look, like I want to be in this world. I want to get these skills. Like, I'd like to be a partner here one day so that I can then be the kind of person who's making decisions about where this money's going and making sure it's going to good places. Right.
Cool.
And they were all on board with it. And like there is always, even in these very casual conversations, like there are sneaky ways to like get little technical things in there, right? Well, how do you think, like, do you think your family business is something that we would invest in? And oh, well, yeah, I think, da, 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 da. And they're like, oh yeah, no, we'd never do that. I was like, oh, no, sorry, never mind then.
Yeah, and so you would talk to them like they were trying to see if you were thinking of like the financial, thinking of it as investment. Did you expect that? That's what I would thought they were going to do to you. Be like, well, tell me about your family business and what are the margins and what's the growth trajectory and da da da.
They did, yeah. Like it wasn't like they weren't asking me for like specific number because, like honestly, I wouldn't know. Like I'm not that involved with it. But they, from like a high level strategy perspective, like what growth looks like, why you grow, where you grow, and like what are the important things that they're looking at? Because we look at emerging restaurant concepts, and so they were like, what are the markers of like a successful growing restaurant chain?
Yeah,
so there was some of that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, wow. Anything else before we call it? I mean, I think it sounds like you have a good role there. You guys closed your first fund, and then you're putting some of that money to work, I assume. In terms of kind of next steps, it sounds like you're in a great seat. So I assume it's kind of stick it out and potentially ride off into the sunset. Ideally, if things go well.
Yeah, man.
But yes, what's the anything else in terms of you want to share with the audience or with the younger listeners, people who are kind of coming from the nonprofit world or just otherwise people who are thinking of going to nonprofit, or vice versa? I think would be welcome before we call it. Anything else?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I would say is that like going to a small shop like I did, the learning curve was really steep because there's no like analyst below you. There's like, so you end up you own the model, you do all the work and you run the deals, right? Like you have to do some of that higher level stuff. And like, while that was painful for a little while, like for sure, like that's what you need. And it's what I needed, right? Like there's no shortcut.
Were you calling on like former Duke MBAs?
Yes.
Like, what the hell am I doing here?
Yes. You lean on your friends, and I had a really great relationship with the other junior guy at the time, and so I leaned on him a lot. And like, there's no shortcut, there's no substitute for actually doing the work. And so
now you hit your stride.
Yeah, man. Now things are good.
That's awesome, man. Well, listen, James, really appreciate you taking the time to share your story. I'm sure people will enjoy it. And it's a little bit different from what we've done in the past. So I love it. Appreciate it.
Happy to share.
Cool, man. Talk soon.
Thanks, Pat.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick at wallstreetoasis.com. And until next time.